Today on Locked On Red Wings, Marco Kasper shines in Detroit's comeback win in Chicago.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a color commentator for Oakland University Hockey, while Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers. The magic number is 3, baby. Getting very close. What was once a pipe dream is reality, staring us in the face with the Detroit Tigers in a postseason berth. Wild to think. He's also a freelance journalist over at the Detroit News. And while Scotty may have something of much bigger magnitude to talk about over on his own show, I just got to say, Scotty, I think the Red Wings are going to win the Stanley Cup.
I could not agree more. We are so back, baby. We are so back. Look, obviously most of the city of Detroit was, focused on a baseball game on Wednesday night, but there's a pretty darn good hockey game, man. And I think that obviously there's preseason overreactions. That's just kind of part of it. That's part of, we lean into it, unfortunately. Like that's part of our...
I don't lean into anything, Scotty. I genuinely believe this.
You should not say that out loud. We've talked about this, but I think that it's one of the... It's one of the beautiful yet frustrating parts of preseason is just like, all right, like we all have to overreact and we all have to have like the knee-jerk reactions to a lot of stuff. But I actually do think that there is some takeaways in this game that are fairly interesting. And it's not any big picture like Lucas Raymond scored a goal on the Blackhawks preseason team, so like he's gonna have an 100-point season. Like it's not anything like brash like that, but there's some situational stuff that you pointed out before we hit record that I think is interesting, like usage and deployment stuff that I think is kind of telling. And it's always fun just to see the guys that aren't in the NHL yet that are getting an opportunity and whatnot too. Taking a look at them for the first time this fall. Weird to say this fall, but I think that there is some takeaways still. Just got to be careful of how much we're going to lean into said takeaways. That's all.
You know what we should lean into today is today's sponsor. That's Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day as well. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and, of course, on YouTube. Yeah, and I think, traditionally when we do these post-game recaps, we lead off with our key difference maker, like the player or the event that made the difference in the hockey game. But as you pointed out, to your credit, in our pre-show talk, it doesn't really make sense to do a key difference maker in a preseason game. Instead, we're going to talk about the takeaway. What's the key takeaway from this game? And it can be something that happened on the ice, or it could be like, what did the power play units look like? What did we think of this mixed match youth lineup that we may have saw? So let's start there, Scotty. When we talk about key takeaways from preseason game number 1, and when we say takeaways, we say that with a big grain of salt, right? Because as you put it, all joking aside, we're not trying not to make too much of what we saw, but the takeaway can be like, that was really interesting, and I would love to know why they chose to do that, and if we'll see more of it. So with that being said, Scotty, what is your key takeaway from the first preseason game?
I'm gonna cheat here a little bit, and I just kind of steal your cold open there. I think one of the biggest takeaways was how good Marco Kasper looked,
Dude,
and I
so
think
good.
that. It was one of those things where it wasn't even in like spurts. It wasn't even, like at this part of the game, he looked good. And then there was a couple of shifts. Now, like he was pretty consistently applying pressure and doing things on both sides of the ice. I mean, even later in the game, the fact that he, didn't let up. This all sounds like very cliche stuff. Oh, he didn't let up and he played super hard and whatnot. But like, that's kind of what we saw. You know what I mean? Like he even as the game went along and, in the second half of the hockey game there, I still thought he looked really good. I think that's one of my biggest takeaways. I know it's one of your biggest takeaways, and I think it's kind of one of the biggest takeaways from the fan base for somebody that some people still think has an outside shot to even, kick his way onto the roster here early in the season.
Yeah, and we've talked so much about Nate Danielson or Michael Brandsegg-Nygard that Marco Kasper's kind of gone under the radar, flown under the radar for us. Not that we have been doubting his ability or anything, just that those other two guys or even Carter Mazur, because we're super biased towards him, we're kind of just catching our attention a little bit more. But Kasper looked really good in this hockey game. And I don't think it's cliche to say any of that. While you can't take too much away out of a player's performance from a preseason game in terms of on-ice result, I think you can take away, why that result occurred for that player. And for me, that's clearly because this player, Marco Kasper, was playing like somebody who had something to prove. He played his ass off, and that was because he very, very clearly wants to make this hockey team. And, he's already made his NHL debut a couple seasons ago and got his knee blown up in that one game he got to play. And then he started slow in the AHL last year and then blossomed with the rest of the team in the second half. And in this game against a team, and this is where you can't take too much away either from the type of roster structure you play in preseason either, because if you're playing a team's A squad, right? For instance, I would consider this pretty close to the Blackhawks A squad. You had Connor Bedard on the ice. You had Alec Martinez, Alex Vlasic, Bertuzzi, Brody, Teravainen, Hall, Seth Jones, and then their big prospects like Savoy, as well as Frank Nazar. It's pretty close to their A squad that you're going to get. Peter Mrazek started in net. But at the same time, you can't put too much stock into him performing so well against those guys, because as you'll hear us talk about later with our top line, which was the Red Wings' bona fide top line, those guys aren't really worried about a roster spot, so they're going half speed. And so that's where when you're watching a player perform really well in the preseason, the main takeaway is the level of effort that they're putting in, because they have something to prove. And on penalty kills, rather, is where he really shined. He was getting into board battles, winning those puck battles against two other guys, pushing it out into the neutral zone for a shorthanded breakaway. Or he'd force a turnover behind the net and make a move in tight on Mrazek and try and score a goal. Marco Kasper, time and time again, was winning puck battles, forcing turnovers, and getting shots on net. He looked really good. And early on, his faceoffs, he was losing quite a bit of them, but by the end of the game, he was just one below 50% in terms of faceoffs won versus loss.
Dang right.
Carter, I think Marco Kasper was the Red Wings' key takeaway of this game. He looked really good. So much so that the Blackhawks radio team mentioned it. They're like, yeah, this kid for the Red Wings, Marco Kasper, has looked really stellar this game.
And I think that is, if we are going to have, again, biggest takeaway or biggest overreaction, I think that one of the bigger overreactions that's going to kind of sweep across the fan base after this game is, Marco Kasper's odds of making the team. And there's a lot of, again, if the season started tomorrow, I would still probably say no, just because of the amount of depth they have at the NHL level. But, you keep playing like this. If the rest of the preseason, we continue to say, wow, he looks like the best player on the ice, then, that conversation can get more and more real. No one expected Lucas Raymond to make the team out of camp his rookie year either, right? That's just that always, there's always one or two of those every training camp. So we'll see how it plays out. Like I said, currently I'd still lean no, but I think that is right, deservedly so. That is probably the biggest overreaction. That's I don't even want to say overreaction. The biggest reaction that's going to be sweeping the fan base here after this game. He looks really, really sharp.
He did, and that doesn't mean that he's going to make the team. But it means that he's going to try as hard as he can.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, he's going to try as hard as he can to make it difficult on the Red Wings to justify sending him down. And after one game, he's making it really hard.
Right, good problem to have.
Yeah, so we're going to do a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about other notable performances or other notable takeaways from this game. There's actually a lot I want to talk about, despite it being a preseason game, and that's just mostly because you get a look at so many different players, so many different aspects and angles you can approach a preseason game from. So stay tuned for that in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. They have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks allows you to curate and make it easier to save more on sports, concert, comedy, theater, and so much more. And they have this handy new all-in pricing toggle that when you turn it on, it will show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So turn on that all-in pricing toggle. Get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy with those seat views, or get that lowest price guarantee, and Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, just as a quick recap for the people before we get too far into our notable performers and our key takeaways, the goal scorers in this game were Tyler Motte in the first period for an early 1-0 lead. Second goal by the Red Wings was scored by Jeff Petry, assisted on a wonderful play by Carter Mazur, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Lucas Raymond scored the eventual game winner on a power play in the third period, and then Olli Motte from Gustafsson made it 4-2 late in the third. Those are your goal scores. Back to the key takeaways and the notable performers, and some of those takeaways will wrap back into the goals that I just mentioned. But Scotty, what else do you have in terms of takeaways?
Yeah, I think one of the takeaways I had was another thing that we, again, I kind of teased at the beginning of the show and that we had talked about before we hit record here that you had brought up originally. And that was, the deployment of Tyler Motte and co, I think is a takeaway in this game. Like when we signed Tyler Motte, we all knew what he was about and what kind of roles he was going to be put in. But I think to have it be so aggressive and dramatic and like abundantly clear what kind of role they're going to put him in and what kind of role, honestly, maybe even more so, what role he's clearly not going to play going forward. I think you could take a lot out of, that's the stuff that I think we look for the most in preseason, right? Is stuff like that, how certain players are used, and any line Tyler Motte was on, one specifically, but really any line he touched was used very specifically in right off rip here in game 1 of the preseason.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, too, when you talk about the deployments of that line. Like, this is a preseason game where your presumed fourth line, I shouldn't say presumed because Austin Watson's on a PTO, but that all NHL players, right? Austin Watson, Joe Veleno, Tyler Motte, no matter how fringe they may be, these guys most recently played in the NHL. Yet, they played as the fourth line and played only 6 minutes and 24 seconds of time on ice at 5-on-5. And they got caved in at 5-on-5 in the preseason. I'm trying to look here what their defensive zone faceoffs were, because part of that could be deployment as well. Yes, to be fair, they only got 33% offensive zone faceoff percentage. So you're getting to play deployed more in the neutral and defensive zone or on the fly, not getting a lot of offensive zone opportunities. But why would you? Because of that line's makeup. So you can explain away part of the reason they got caved in by the fact that they were getting deployed in defensive zone situations with their limited minutes. Sample size also a big part of that. But also not too exciting to see a line full of NHL players get caved in the preseason, no matter the deployment. So not to make too big of an excuse. But I'm not too worried about it either because, again, it's preseason. I'm not going to overreact. I still don't really think Austin Watson's even I find it hard to believe he'll be signed to an NHL-level contract unless it's as a guy who gets signed and sent to the AHL as a call-up. But he did make a really nice pass to Tyler Motte for that first goal. It was a really nice play in the offensive zone. But outside that, I kind of want to talk about the goaltending too. I think that's another one of the big takeaways from this hockey game. Ville Husso played the...
Yeah, honest. Like I think I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think the entire goaltending situation in this game.
Right. It was said before the game that Ville Husso was going to play the first 40 minutes and Cossa would play the last 20. And I was really... I don't want to sound mean, but like that was the most Ville Husso performance I've ever seen. Like it's what we've become so accustomed to where he will he'll play well. He'll make big saves. Like he made 2 big saves on breakaways, and I was like, awesome. He's healthy. That's great to see. And then in the second period, Teuvo Teravainen just kind of does like he's spinning out of coverage with the puck and just kind of like lets go a backhander that doesn't even get off the ice, and it just skirts right past Husso's pad to give a 2-0 lead to the Blackhawks. Again, I'm not here to try and overreact or anything. He hasn't played a game with live reps in over a year and a half, so there's going to be some like rust to shake off, but I'm not going to lie I'm not going to lie and say that it wasn't a little discouraging when I saw that goal let up, but I'm also not going to write him off in preseason game number 1 when he hasn't played in a year and a half in all reality. Like there's still a lot of time and a lot of catch up he's got to do. And we saw the other 39 minutes of this game, 39 minutes of this game that he played, he looked pretty sharp.
Yeah, I think this is one where we have to tread really lightly with the how much we react to this performance, right? Like this is, like you said, this is quite literally his first healthy game action in dang near a year. Like I know he tried to come back for a little bit there, in the second half, and then like immediately left again, and like this is the first time he's been fully healthy seeing NHL game action in a very, very long time. So I'm like, this is what preseason is for.
Exactly.
I expect him to get a lot of minutes and a lot of opportunities in the preseason. I think he should. I think he probably should more than any other goalie on the team, to be completely honest with you. I think that's, especially if you're going to run 3, you're going to want Husso to be ready and legit. And honestly, if he's struggling a lot going into opening night, then maybe that's the decision, and he's the one that you have to part ways with to avoid carrying 3 goalies start the year again. Like I think that you have to keep playing him, and
you do.
And I didn't think he looked stellar in this game. Obviously, I mean, he, 2 goals in 17 opportunities isn't gonna win you any awards or anything like that. But I didn't think he wasn't terrible. He wasn't a traffic cone out there either, and
he made some big saves too,
right?
Like 2 breakaway saves.
This is just one where it's too early, and we're too close to coming off of major injuries, and there's just so many factors here that I'm not going to jump to any conclusions game 1. But I think that he should and will be the most played goalie in the preseason, so that they can kind of know what they have in him going into opening night.
Yeah, like that first goal he let in, like it was the Blackhawks were changing and a man was left uncovered. It was a breakaway. The shot went off the post and nobody cleared the rebound. Like that first goal, I don't think is his fault whatsoever. It was just that second goal was like such a softie that I was like getting flashbacks to what we had seen the year and a half of hockey we did get out of him before the injury shut him down altogether. But as you were saying, and as I was saying just before that, we need to see a lot more of Husso in the preseason before we can draw any types of conclusions, because he needs to get his feet under him. So I'm not gonna, like you said, we got to tread lightly before we overreact one way or the other on his performance. The Cossa, being the other goalie that played in this game, looked good. He looked good. Faced 10 shots in the third period. He stopped them all. I think the thing that made me the most pleased about his performance was just getting in position and not over lateraling one way or the other. Something that a lot of young goalies will tend to do is overplay their position. Something that, guys like Mrazek, we were very critical of when he was a Red Wing, not on this podcast. We weren't around when Mrazek was on the team, but just as regular fans, it was his ability, or Nedeljkovic even, like they would skate too far one way, lateral too far one way. Yeah,
that was Mr. Over aggressive. That was that was, oh my goodness, man! I can remember Yeah, a lot of conversations on this show. That one was on this show about how overly aggressive he was, for sure.
Aggressive. And Cossa did just a really nice job of getting his body where it needed to be, making himself big and making the save, and the defense took care of the rest. So not a lot to break down on Kossa's play, just very happy that he performed like that. Like that he looked good, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go to another quick break when we return. We'll wrap up anything else we have to say. I think I have a couple thoughts on Edvinsson. Obviously, still want to talk about Carter Mazur and that top line / power play. It's exciting. Segment 3 coming up. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Indeed you do.
Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, I think the next thing that's interesting, I kind of want to just talk about the roster shakedown of this game, mostly because you had one forward line that was your true NHL forward line in this hockey game, and a pretty much your entire defensive core minus your top pair, and then the rest of the forward group were prospects and fringe guys, right? Like we talked about it. You had on forward, obviously, you had your Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond line. They were fine. I mean, this is not really that serious for them, so they were kind of... It is really funny, when they decide to turn it on, they turned it on. Power play, their second power play of the game, third period, tied 2-2. Great example. They just decided, okay, it's time to score now. And the passing in the offensive zone was immaculate. You had Gustafsson on the point. You had DeBrincat, Larkin, and Raymond, in the bumpers and on the bumpers and in the middle. And then you had Mazur down low. And that was the most, intriguing part was Mazur was on power play 1 in this preseason game as the net front presence. He was great at it as well. And as soon as they decided to score, they just pass, Lucas Raymond score. So it's a good reminder to people who watch the preseason that don't take any win too seriously, because when the top talent decides to take it over, the top talent's going to take it over.
Yeah, I and honestly, that's what you want to see, right? The fact that Lucas Raymond pretty much anytime he really wanted to could have just been all right, let's bury the puck here, bud.
Right.
The fact that that's on the table shows you how talented and how good he is, obviously. But honestly, I think one of the biggest takeaways I also had was Mazur. So I'm glad you brought that up. He's obviously one of the key fringe guys that we have been talking about all summer and will continue to be, I'm sure, throughout the preseason. I almost said postseason. Getting a little ahead of myself there. I really think that Mazur, as you mentioned, being the net front guy is really kind of the role that we all expected him to play and be really good at, right? That kind of grinder, stirrer there in front of the net. And he's talked about that a lot, and came into camp a little bit bigger as well, as you love to mention, gained some weight there. He, I think, is really prepping to be that kind of grinded out type of player at the NHL level. And that's why, we've said it a million times on here. We're probably going to say it a million more times. I'm not trying to be a broken record here, but this is probably the Wings are probably going to be much more comfortable putting him in a bottom 6 or even just a straight up 4th line role if a spot opens up, and you kind of saw the reason why in this game. Like, that's the kind of player that he's going to be, and I think that he can really excel at that. And as good as, again, like, if he's really good at it and kind of turns into like Bert, then that's a middle six type of role on a really good team, obviously. But I think that you kind of saw the flashes in this game, and him at the net front was one of the biggest reasons for that.
Yeah, and I mean, he had 3 minutes and 36 seconds according to ESPN of power play time in this game, which is like really high because he was playing on the top power play line, like, and he looked fine. And that Jeff Petry game tying goal does not happen without his second effort. What a rip too by Petry, just wound up and ripped it,
baby. Grip it and rip it.
And he made a spectacular diving play to get that puck to Petry and away from the defending Blackhawk player, kept that play alive, and it resulted in a goal. Like, that's the type of gritty second effort that the Red Wings are going to be looking for from a guy of Carter Mazur's caliber. Somebody's going to leave it all out on the ice. And I think he's a perfect net front kind of candidate because he plays that gritty style that they want so much. I do want to put an addendum, too. I know we were talking about that fourth line, Joveleno, Motte, and Watson conversation too. Part of the reason they got so few 5-on-5 ice time is also because they played damn near 4 minutes of penalty kill time. 3 minutes, actually. I misread that. Joveleno had 3 minutes and 2 seconds on the penalty kill in this game. Tyler Motte had 2 minutes and 35 seconds, which is roles that we kind of expected them to be in. Marco Kasper had 3 minutes and 5 seconds on the penalty kill because there were quite a few penalty kills in this game as well. So that also helps explain away why their 5-on-5 ice time was so few compared to other players, because they were going to be used mostly in what they'll probably be used in the regular season, which is in a shutdown penalty kill-esque role, at least for Tyler Motte. Joveleno, I'm still not sure what his line's going to be. I mean, that Joveleno, Berggren, Motte line still baffles me, especially if the Cop line's your shutdown line. But Tyler Motte's role is pretty clearly defined by his career thus far, what he's going to be for this team.
And again, this game already.
Right. From there, let's talk about the defensive pairings, because we didn't get a single defensive prospect in this lineup. Yeah. And I mean, obviously I know Johansson and Edvinsson were, but like, they're not prospects. They're on the team. Like they're just on the team now because of a couple different extenuating circumstances, but they are Red Wings. The only pair that wasn't on this ice was Seider and Sherratt. You had Edvinsson and Petry as your top pair, and they played top pair minutes. They got a total of 22 and a half minutes for Edvinsson. That led the way for the entire team, which you love to see. Jeff Petry, his partner, at 22 minutes. And they gave Simon Edvinsson 4 minutes and 13 seconds of shorthanded ice time. Overall thoughts on Edvinsson's game? I know that's somebody that a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, I didn't think he was one of the bigger takeaways from the game. I mean, clearly, right? We're talking about him here at the very end of the show. I don't think that he was one of the biggest takeaways. I didn't really take much out of it, to be honest. I didn't think he, I didn't watch him and go, oh my goodness, I'm terrified for a full season of this. But I didn't watch him and get, like the impression of like how we talked about Raymond either, where it was like, okay, he just kind of turned it around and ripped it. It was a fine first preseason game. I didn't really take much out of it.
Yeah, and my biggest takeaway is that I'm very happy that they gave him 22 and a half minutes of ice time. Yeah. Like, I'm glad they're exposing him as much as possible in the preseason. That being said, and it's always easier, like the rough moments for any player always stands out brighter than like if they're just doing their job. He got burned a couple times, giving up some big opportunities on Husso, and that's where Husso made a couple big saves, one on a breakaway. Like, he got beat on the outside a couple times. And I remember that from last preseason too, where I don't know if it's his gap control or if he's just not skating back as hard as he should, but he tends to get, if he's going to get beat, it's going to be on the outside a lot. I don't remember actually, down the stretch last season, he ended up giving a pretty gross goal against Up because he got beat on the outside and then in desperation tried to throw his hip out and just missed altogether, giving up a breakaway. Yeah. So that seems to be Simon Edvinsson's early on in his career. His one weakness is he tends to get beaten a little bit on the outside too often for my comfort level.
Your liking, yeah.
My liking, thank you. But that's something that can be easily fixed too. It's not like a critical error in his game that can never be addressed. It's just going to take some tweaking with the coaching staff to make sure he's squaring up properly with those guys breaking down the wing. Outside that, I thought Albert Johansson, kind of like another guy that flies under the radar for a lot of Red Wings fans. He looked great in transition, which is something that we knew Albert Johansson really excels at, and he's going to have to continue to shine if he wants to try and crack an everyday lineup, because like in all reality, he's got to take a roster spot from Olli Motte, who is a veteran NHLer.
You gotta hang your hat on something, man. You gotta prove that you're really good at some aspects to kind of separate yourself, and that's certainly. I mean, we talked about that with Rinaldi, right, last year, about how his transition game was. So yeah, hopefully that's something that translates to the league here.
Absolutely. Outside of that, and Olli Motte's just absolute snip show. Nice assist by Eric Gustafsson. Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't think so, man. I think that's everything we wanted to cover. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. That is a pre-recorded episode. I recorded it last Sunday, so if any information sounds... Yeah, it was a crossover with the Canadiens, something we've been teasing a little bit. Finally got that knocked out. So Scotty will be back with a new episode on Monday to recap 2 preseason games.
Solo
preview.
Baby. Buckle up, everybody. Buckle up. We're riding solo in here.
Your Monday episode is such an alley-oop. You get 2 recaps and a preview in the same episode.
Right.
You talk one segment about each thing, and you're like, all right, see you guys next time.
Not even the next day. It's still a recap. Like, it's still, yeah.
I'll be back later in the week. I don't know exactly if I'll be back for Thursday's episode, but I'll be back for Fridays for sure. We'll figure that out. It depends on whether or not I'm sleepy. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. See your team every day.